Now, I'm not nocturnal, but I wouldn't say that I have a very balanced sleep schedule. What I mean by that is I'm not up till like 3, 4 a.m., but there are some nights that I am up till 1 or 2, which isn't late depending on how old you are, but it can also be very, very late depending on how old you are. And when I do, thank God, I don't have any trouble sleeping. I'm not like an insomniac or anything where I can't sleep because that is a terrible, terrible fate. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. I've heard the stories. I have friends who are insomniacs. Sounds terrible. Um, Unfortunately, I'm just lazy. So I sleep in, and then when it's time to go to sleep, I can't because, I've only been awake for 12 hours or so. But when I'm up at night, it is kind of depressing to be in a dark room all by yourself. Maybe you have the computer screen going, but if the majority of the room is dark and you're still like, wildly awake, whatever that term is, it's kind of depressing to be in a room completely dark. And so that's where the topic of this video comes in, night lights. Now, typically, typically, night lights are associated with children who are afraid of the dark. And while there's nothing wrong with being afraid of the dark. Um, I don't use nightlights for that. My nightlights are to give me some sense of being a human, meaning if I'm sleeping in all day and I never see the sun and then I'm up all night and the sun's not out, I need some light on my skin or else I'll turn gray. You know, I have met people who are gray, not like gray, but they're Caucasian, but they don't look Caucasian. And instead of that white peach skin, like the crayons, it was like peach. You wouldn't use white because that's too white, but like the peach, they would be like gray, kind of gray. And their skin was kind of like ashy. It was bad. It was bad. I can only imagine what they look like today. Now, unfortunately, a nightlight won't protect you from that fate, but the psychology behind it can actually be pretty decent. Yes, it's no substitute for the real sun, but if you are not tired at all, it might be beneficial to keep a light on, especially if you're not at your computer. If you're doing something else, meaning if you're reading, you should have a nightlight on. If you are like organizing in your room or doing stuff around your room, it can be beneficial to have a nightlight on. And there are many different kinds of nightlights. My personal night, it's not a night light per se. It's a lamp that I use at night, but it is a light that I use at night, whatever that means. So, I'm referring to it as a nightlight, but typically nightlights, like I said, are associated with children, and they can be pretty cute. Not the kids, that's weird. The nightlights, you can have ones with like moons on it, or like a sleeping bear, like a bear in a nightcap. You can have themed ones like a SpongeBob nightlight, also known as a nighty night light. But in my personal opinion, I like the ones with moons on it because it associates, the moon with sleeping, which is always quite nice. But everyone has their own personal taste. But it's very important. You know, I feel like the younger generation is more and more, especially with the development of technology, more and more turning to kind of the nightlife lifestyle. You work all day, you go to school all day, you're doing stuff in the afternoon when you get off work or when you get off school, wherever. And really the only time, especially on weekends, that you'll have is at night. And so it can be a very, very special moment. And mood sets everything. So a nice dim light in the corner of your room or behind you, not in direct vision, can make all the difference on your mood, on the feeling of your room, and ultimately your experience as you're doing, whatever, if you're working or doing homework or playing games. It's always nice to have something, some kind of light to, make you feel like you're at least somewhat a human. Humans are designed to see the sun. If you don't see the sun, you got to make do with the next best light. So please consider that. Next time you're up late, maybe flick on a lamp. Nice, soft light can really make all the difference. But to each their own. I appreciate you listening to this, and I will see you tomorrow.